Hey everybody, Fishman here. Welcome to another video. It's time for another installment on the air pump build, and it's a good thing I didn't try and do one last week. Mostly because currently what I'm doing here is working on the flywheel, and I have gone back and forth on the size of it, how big the hole should be in the middle. Pretty much every decision for it I've changed over the last week and a half. And if I had tried to give you an update for it last week, pretty much everything would have changed anyway for this week. And as this video progresses, you're going to see all the different things I mean. Now, this little piece of brass here I'm turning now is 2 inches, and it is going to be not the flywheel itself, but it's going to be the secondary part for it, where the bracket is, there's going to be a small bracket attached to this, and that is what's going to actuate the actual pistons. So the rods are going to attach to this, and the main part of the flywheel is just going to be there to provide balance and counterweight for this. And you'll notice there's a 1-inch hole in this, and the reason I went this way to begin with is the arbor I have, the larger aluminum one that I use for turning down mostly acrylic, that's the diameter of the hole for that, and that's the shaft for it. And I went that way because it is really sturdy, and because I was turning down that large piece of aluminum, I wanted to make sure I had enough meat on that it would withstand the forces involved. Now obviously this part here is a lot smaller, and it's brass, so it's not hard to turn. It's harder obviously than aluminum, but it's not hard enough to be of any real concern for having too much torque on it. But like I said, I was still at this stage going with the 1-inch. Now if you remember when I turned down that large flywheel for the aluminum one, I had done it differently. I was doing it the same way I would have done it if I were using the table saw, except of course I was using the milling machine here. And this is the way I should have done it, because this is the proper way to do it. Whatever you turn on this, it is going to pivot around that fulcrum, which is, well, in this case, a 1-inch turned down piece of aluminum. And no matter how I turn this, the edge will always be exactly the same distance from the center. So it is the best way of doing this. And again, like I said, it should be the way I did the larger one. But because I was doing the acrylic versions of that on the table saw, I thought I would show you a version of doing that on the mill, and yeah, it wasn't the right way to do it. Now I'm not going to take this all the way down this way because it's not really necessary. I just want to take the points off, and of course show you how you could do it. You could take this all the way down around that way, just like on the table saw with the acrylic. So I'm going to do the rest of this on the lathe here, and I'm not going to bother showing that to you because this video is going to be really, really long. Now, the other thing I did, the other thought I had, is I wanted to turn the shaft for these things between centers. Now, this is the most accurate way you can turn anything on a lathe. So that means you can take it off, flip it around, do whatever you want with it, and it'll always go back in the exact same position. Well, I didn't want to buy one. It's not hard to make, so I thought I would make one. And in the end, I don't end up using it. The accuracy of this is only ever so slightly better than what I'm getting with the lathe to begin with, and it just wasn't worth the effort. It turned out that well, like I said, I'm not a machinist, and I am just trying these things out, and I thought this would be an interesting way of going about it. I wasted an afternoon on this all by itself. It is actually something I may end up using later on, hopefully, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to just show you the bits and pieces of this simply because I want to show you how one works. So what you do is you take any kind of material that you want to turn, you put 2 holes on either side at 60 degrees, because that's the angle that's on each of those end pieces. The one on the left goes in the chuck, and the one on the right goes in the tailstock, and they should be taper jointed, taper fit, but I don't know how to do that. So these are just going to be they're just going to be fit in, and that's where I'm getting most of my error, I suspect, because Each of those, the tailstock and the other thing, simply have too much error in them, and it just compounds. So you'll notice that the one on the right, that's the smaller of the flywheels. It has now been inserted with another piece of brass. You can't quite see it there, but you're going to easily see it on this one here. I have friction fit a piece of brass in there, and I've drilled that to 7/8 because this will be a much nicer, smaller friction. I left this one a little, this one here is just raised a little bit still so that you can actually see the difference. Once this is fully turned down, that actually becomes almost completely invisible. But I left a little raised here just so you can see that that's the brass insert in there. And the amount of friction, the pressure fit for this is actually rather astounding. This is a strong enough joint that when I'm actually turning that in the lathe, I don't have any fear of it, falling out or whatever. So this is how turning between centers works. That is just that's a bracket that just holds. You'll see in a second here. There's the other fitting that goes on the other side has a ring on it, and that bar you see going across there, it just makes that turn. Now I was going to turn that down so that it would fit in better, but again, this is just a test, and I decided after trying a couple turns with this, I was getting reasonable results, but not enough of a difference to make it continue. I didn't bother doing the rest of it, so I was going to give you a quick spin here to show you how it works. And then that bar in the middle is the part that you work on, and of course you can take that ring off and you can flip it around, you can do other work on it, you can put it back in. And the theory, of course, is it'll always end up being accurate, so it's a better way of turning things down. Or at least it would be if my machining skills were any better, but I can't turn down a Morris taper, so this is an interesting experiment, but it's something I just end up not using. So what I'm going to show you next here is I'm going to do the brass insert for the main flywheel, and this is just to show you how much effort it takes to get this to fit in the first place. And actually this is easier than when I went to install the rods. You'll see that in a little bit here, but this is a really good, strong, and solid vise, and it requires pretty much all the torque on this thing to get that brass fitting to fit in there. And what I'm going to do is I oversized it because what I want to do is I want to force it through enough on both sides, and then I'm going to turn it down so it's a nice clean fit, just like I did for the other one. So that's as far as I can get with that. And what I'm going to do now is I have to put a couple of spacers in here and get it to fit through the rest of the way, because it's too tight to tap through with anything. And also, I don't want to pound on this because I don't want to ruin any kind of flatness of that plate. So I'm just going to squeeze that through a little bit more there. And then I'm going to put it on the lathe, and I'm going to turn it so that it is flush. Well, not quite flush at this point, because there is some more work I need to do on it first. So you can see that bit of part that's sticking out. I'm just going to turn that down a fair amount, and then I'm going to show you what that looks like, and then we're going to go on to the next step, which is to insert a turned down brass rod. Now, this should end up being a nice, true turning. You can see that wobble that's there right now. I want to get rid of that. And the only way to be sure that that is actually gone when this thing is mounted is to turn it on the actual shaft it's going to be on. And that's the reason why I was doing that little experiment with the turning between centers, because that would be the best way of doing that. But I wasn't entirely convinced that the one I turned down was going to be solid enough to hold on to something of this size. And again, I didn't want to get to all this point and end up just ruining something like that, because making a whole new one from this point on would just be really just too much. So this rod here, this rod is 1/1000th of an inch too small. When I first started making it, it was I wanted it to be a little bit loose because I hadn't decided to go friction fit yet. I wasn't sure where I was going to use set screws or cap screws, whatever you want to call them, grub screws to hold this in place, but I thought that would be too tacky. So I used this anyway because I wanted to get a feel for how it looked, and you can see as I'm trying to pull this out here, it's actually reasonably snug. It's actually a good fit, but it is way too loose, well, by 2/1000th of an inch for a friction fit. So that's what this rod is. This one is, like I said, 2/1000th of an inch and greater in diameter. And I'm not going to show you the process I went through to get this into this position. It was long, it was lengthy, it was annoying. It involved some wooden blocks I had to put together and a sledgehammer, and I actually ended up dulling one of the ends, but I had oversized this sufficiently that I could just trim that end off. So at least I was thinking a little bit ahead that way. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to turn this down, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it back and forth, take a little bit off here, a little bit off there, and get this as true as I can. It ended up turning out pretty good. And there's no glue, there's no screws, there's no nothing. And this turned out to be not, you know, down to the 1/1000th of an inch or anything as far as trueness goes, but it's more than what I need for a flywheel for an air pump. So as you can see, this turns nice and even, and it's not actually finished yet. I would just still have a little bit rough, but you can see that there is very little, if any, wobble in this, which is nice. So this is pretty much the end of the video. I'm going to show you what this looks like after I flip it and show you it turning the other direction as well. I still have to put the brass rod on the end, but I'm going to do that probably for the next video for this, and then get the mountings for this. So I hope you like this, and if you do like this style of video, please like and or subscribe, and definitely leave me some comments on what you think about this. It was a long process to get to this, and it's probably not exactly apparent what's going on here for those of you who don't do any machining, but this should actually turn reasonably nicely. And once I put the brackets on and show you all that stuff, the rest of this should come together relatively easily. And there you go. That's well, that's the best I can do anyway. It still needs to be finished a little bit more, but I think it's good enough, at least for the rest of the rough work for this. And then when I get to the point where it needs to look pretty, I'll do that. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video, and bye for now.